This week, we've got some commentary from Henry C. Clausen on the religious wars of the world. How do we stop them? How can we mitigate what seems to be a proliferation, intolerance for others' beliefs, and forcing others to believe in what you believe? Well, Henry C. Clausen has a particular idea that he finds tested, tried, and true. Then we've got an all-new Masonic Myth Busters segment with Worshipful Brother Patrick Dey. Was Elias Ashmole a Rosicrucian? Well, to answer that, we've got to look at his diaries and read exactly what they say, and do a little reading on the history of the people contained and mentioned therein. Worshipful Brother Dey does just that and teaches us all a little something this week. Let's learn and get entertained. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back to the show. This is episode number 695. I want to thank our contributors, fellows, producers, and our legacy partners of the WCY podcast, those folks who make this podcast possible through their generosity. If you're curious on how you can help support the WCY podcast, head on over to our website, wcypodcast.com. Click on Support the Show and check out the various options and learn how you can help direct an episode of the WCY podcast. Presentations coming up, I'll be at the Valley of Columbus, the ancient accepted Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction. I'll be doing a talk on the Tetragrammaton. And then, of course, next year we've got Masonic Week happening, as well as the Conference of Grand Masters. So stay tuned for news on those things. Let's go ahead and kick off the education this week with a return to the New Age magazine, December 1978, number 12. The Grand Commander's Message by Brother Henry C. Clausen, 33rd degree, who was the Grand Commander of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction for a long while, titled Religious Warfare. The several militant demands for possession of East Jerusalem point up a dangerous development. It recalls to mind vividly the sad and emotional story of religious warfare that has repetitively plagued the ancient city, for the older part contains the most holy Christian, Jewish, and Muslim shrines. The seemingly insoluble problem is how to satisfy the claims of these three religious groups to this one area. If the potential conflict that is built into the situation materializes, it could stoke the fires of deep and abiding passions that could destroy the Camp David framework for peace. Unfortunately, all humans, like the members of these groups, seem structured to continual strife. Where there are, quote-unquote, many men, there are many minds. Of the thousands of millions born into the world, no two were exactly alike. Instead, everyone is physically and mentally different. This accounts for the diversity of thought and action and religion. Consequently, peace on earth and goodwill agreements are all too few and impermanent. We must be realistic. This is no time for simple reassurances. As has been well said, quote, "The law of a worthy life is the law of strife," end quote. All nature seems to follow that law, from the lowest to the highest. Man, it seems at times, is more vicious, more cruel, more lethal than any beast. His inventions multiply with devilish ingenuity, his capacity for mass murders of his fellow creatures. Churchmen who pray to the same God have not been exempt from exterminations of each other. The paradox of God-loving or God-fearing Americans, English, Germans, and French arrayed in combat with atheistic Russia, either as ally or enemy, is that godless Russia won. Consider also the wars that were fought for religious domination. Huguenots were massacred in 1562. French church-state battles were fought over fiscal policies of the then powerful papal courts, papal tax collectors, and papal prisons. John Huss sought religious reformations, and for this was burned at the stake. That started the Hussite War of 7 years. Luther objected to the Vatican's greed for money. The result was papal anathema and the so-called Peasants' War in Germany. Hundreds of Protestants were burned in a fury of long-lasting battles, including those of Dreux, St. Denis, and Montcontour. An illusory peace with toleration of Huguenots was aborted in only 3 years with the 1572 massacre of St. Bartholomew. There then followed 8 successive religious wars lasting 11 years until 1609. In 1618, a similar war exploded with fury and lasted for 30 years, and so on for another 100 years. Centuries before this, Genghis Khan swept a murderous swath across the civilized world to kill all those who worshipped any god but his. Later, the series of crusades were also drawn to the Magnet of Jerusalem, but with painful struggles and numerous slain or crippled. Today, mass murders of millions of defenseless men, women, and children can now be executed with far greater rapidity than ever before because of our modern atomic bombs. Science and medicine have advanced and improved our material life, but they have left our morality in the lurch of the Dark Ages. How then do we stop the infernal strife and slaughter in the name of religion? We can be truly grateful that our country on these western shores has fixed in our Constitution separation of church and state. The wise draftsmen sought to avoid the quarrels and wars, the perils and fears of the old world. They recognized that the primitive instinct to kill will not be abated soon. Man's inhumanity to man, even in our pluralist society, will continue to unfold his animalistic and carnal nature. This will stop only when he can be uplifted from religious differences onto a higher spiritual plane. But there is hope for humanity's transformation and larger destiny. Perhaps our solution lies in an acceptance of the basic teachings essentially similar of great religious leaders. They sought improvements in morals, the brotherhood of man, the fatherhood of God, everlasting life, peace, and happiness for humanity's millions. I include in this group Christ, Moses, Muhammad, Buddha, Zoroaster, and Confucius. Certainly, I do not exclude others. Let us therefore resolve to retain the traditional and essential ingredient of our greatness, namely separation of church and state. The world could well adopt this as an answer to the many pending Middle East problems. We furnish the example of a government in action that has put its foot upon political despotism and spiritual tyranny. There is a haven here for the oppressed. We are equipped with a system that has worked for over 200 years and has demonstrated its wisdom. We can provide for the afflicted and contending rivalries and factions rooted in religions, the healing warmth and vitality, and so give strength and viability to genuine efforts for peace. As a poet may say, in this mad hour, when nations petulant as children in the night, cry down appeals to reason and resort to arms, when ships from 7 seas return as blood-stained doves to the ark, may chance and deity make firm the shutters of thy house, and keep alive upon the hearth the flame of brotherhood. Henry C. Clausen, 33rd degree, Sovereign Grand Commander, December 1978. I found this and I struggled a little bit. I said, well, do we want to read this on the show? Because it is a little bit political. It's some hot button issues that people are immediately going to draw to today. And certainly we have conflict in the Middle East that's been raging for a few years now, more so than the usual. And the world has become entirely divided on the issue. And yet Henry C. Clausen seems to point out not that there is any particular flaw in anybody's particular religious ideology here, but reminds us of a policy that is used like a tool to ensure that we have a foundation for firm brotherhood. As many people claim, no two things will separate men like religion and politics. And certainly in today's political schema, we have religions informing the politics and causing many of the religion's subjective morals into creation of policy, which perhaps one side is meaning well and another side might completely undermine this by doing something in the extreme opposite. And the truth, as all things, probably lies somewhere in the middle. And we have seemed to lost sight of this. So for Henry C. Clausen, he is upholding this idea of the separation of church and state as a paramount step in finding peace, regardless of where it is. And certainly, the piece is a product of the times in which it was written, in that there were very communist regimes happening in Russia, and communism tends to, in most cases, have this sort of atheistic tendency, if not by policy, then by official but secret, if that makes sense. And so, of course, that's where he's coming from when he calls it the godless Russians, right? This is certainly no longer the case, but Russia has its problems as well. The whole world is aflame with issues, but it is up to those seekers of light, those people who see the great philosophy and can figure out how they can implement some good in their circles of influence. And just like ripples in water, right? Throw a stone in the water, ripples out. It's going to affect things. And overall, we can come together to create a greater impact if we're all working toward the same thing. We have to be disruptors. You've heard maybe the term disruptors in business. Well, we need to be disruptors in the way of life. That is bringing about a better existence for the people today, and to be altruistic about it for the people and the kids that are going to grow up in this world after we're gone. Planting a tree knowing we'll never sit under the shade of that tree is a responsibility we have. If you're a Mason, that's your job. It's somewhere in there. It's got to be. It's part of the tenets of the institution. If you are not a Mason, an occultist, a seeker of light in some manner, it's also your job. It's what we're called to do. Next up, we've got a very enlightening Masonic Myth Busters segment with Worshipful Brother Patrick Dey. Let's check this out.
In a digital landscape filled with historical inaccuracy, out-of-context quotes on memes and sound bites, there is an epidemic of fraternal occult, mythological, and historical misinformation. It's time to set the record straight. Masonic Mythbusters with Patrick Dey.
Was Elias Ashmole a Rosicrucian? Elias Ashmole is renowned for a number of reasons. He was a founder of the Royal Society. He was an alchemist, a chemist, a physician, philosopher, antiquarian, and so forth. For Freemasons, he is significant because he is the first person to record that he was made a Freemason. He writes in his diary, date October 16th, 1646, quote, 4:30 p.m., I was made a Freemason at Warrington in Lancashire, with Colonel Henry Manwaring of Caringham in Cheshire. The names of those that were then at the lodge: Mr. Richard Pinkett Warden, Mr. James Collier, Mr. Richard Sankey, Henry Littler, John Elam, Richard Ellen, and Hugh Brewer, end quote. Ashmole is sometimes called the first Freemason, but obviously he wasn't the first. If he was the first, then who initiated him? Sir Robert Moray had actually been made a Mason 5 years prior, on May 20th, 1641, at a Scottish lodge in Edinburgh. Now, to give the benefit of the doubt, perhaps by the first Freemason is meant the first person who truly epitomizes and encapsulates the principles and aims of Freemasonry, as well as being just the kind of person we think of when we think of a Freemason. In which case, yeah, he is. Now, there are a number of names, some more known than others, that we have of early Freemasons. Yet what makes Ashmole so special is that he records it in his diary. He records another Masonic event 35 years later, which was a big dinner and thought to be the impetus of what would become more organized speculative Freemasonry. March 10th, 1682, quote, about 5 p.m. I received a summons to appear at a lodge to be held the next day at Mason's Hall, London, end quote. Then on March 11th, 1682, quote, accordingly I went, and about noon were admitted into the Fellowship of Freemasons, Sir William Wilson, Knight, Captain Richard Brothwick, Mr. William Woodman, Mr. William Gray, Mr. Samuel Taylor, and Mr. William Wise. I was the senior fellow among them, it being 35 years since I was admitted. There were present, besides myself, the fellows after name, Mr. Thomas Wise, Master of the Masons' Company this present year, Mr. Thomas Shortoes, Mr. Thomas Shadbolt, Waynesford Esquire, Mr. Nicholas Young, Mr. John Thompson, and Mr. William Stanton. We all dined at the Half Moon Tavern in Cheapside at a noble dinner prepared at the charge of the new accepted Masons." End quote. We know Ashmole had an interest in the esoteric, the occult, etc. He was known for his antiquarian collection of oddities and mystical manuscripts and objects. He was an alchemist and an astrologer. He would compile numerous excerpts and whole works of alchemical literature, including prose and poetry, which he heavily annotated in his 1652 publication, Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum. It really isn't a surprise that he was then attracted to Freemasonry. However, there is one thing that has long stood out about him and is usually accompanied by a big fat question mark. Was he a Rosicrucian? Now, before proceeding, we should clarify that Rosicrucianism, as it was first conceived, was not a real organization. Tobias Churton would call it, quote, a publicity stunt. Actually, I think he calls it the greatest publicity stunt. And he's not exactly wrong about that. Rosicrucianism basically began and ended with 3 manifestos published in the early 1600s, the Fama Fraternitatis, Confessio, and the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz. Rosicrucianism was the brainchild of Johannes Valentinius Andrea, with a few buddies of his, namely Christopher Besode and Tobias Hess. Upon the publication of these manifestos, there was a sort of frenzy in Europe. There were people who came forward desiring to become members, others claiming they already were members. The Inquisition actually led a manhunt for this society, but it's a bit difficult to hunt something that doesn't exist. After some years, many began to suspect that the whole thing was a fraud, but many believed in the message and agenda of the manifestos and decided to start their own Rosicrucian societies. The basic ideology of Rosicrucianism is largely millenarian, i.e. a hopeful spirit of change at the turn of the first millennium. It's anti-Catholic, Protestant, and follows in the wake of Luther's Reformation, but it advocates going further. Effectively, Rosicrucianism is an enduring continuation of the millenarian movement, envisioning the fulfillment of the ideas of Joachim de Fiore and Jakob Böhme, embracing the scientific and mystical studies of Paracelsus, and completing a politico-religio reformation that Martin Luther fell short of. Rosicrucianism then enters England from Germany via 2 persons, namely the alchemist Robert Fludd and the translator and author Thomas Vaughan. Vaughan would translate the manifestos and publish them in England. Fludd embraces the ideologies of Rosicrucianism and is believed to receive some sort of formal induction into Rosicrucianism via Michael Mayer. Thus, many who proclaim Ashmole was a Rosicrucian frequently go through intellectual gymnastics to link him to some sort of tradition perpetuated by Fludd and Mayer. It is really difficult to get into any detail with these associations and transmission of ideas because, truth be told, we just are not entirely certain. It's a lot of vague mentions and records and known or supposed meetings of various individuals. It's a bit like the School of Night, or sometimes it's called the School of Atheism, which supposedly include Sir Walter Raleigh, Thomas Harriot, Christopher Marlowe, George Chapman, and Matthew Radon, and probably others. We know all these guys knew each other at some point in their lives, they having similar scientific, religious, and artistic ideologies and agendas, sometimes influencing each other directly. Yet, there's no explicit evidence these guys formed a little social club to hang out and talk about Shakespeare and atheism. Yeah, probably a few of them had dinner a couple of times, but it's hard to say if there was actually a secret society called the School of Night. It's totally theoretical. Similarly, these Rosicrucian associations of Flood, Vaughan, Mayer, Andrea, Hess, Besode, Simon Studian, William Lilly, etc., are all very loose with nothing definitive or explicit tying them all together. They all kind of know some of each other, but not really as a massive collective. Now, Ashmole gets his association with Rosicrucianism via a mysterious historical character named Father Backhouse. This is usually a telltale. It's how you can tell if what you're reading is by someone who bothered to read or even gloss through Ashmole's diary, or if they are relying on a source that also didn't bother to read Ashmole's diary. This is a curious pattern I've noticed over the years. I'll be reading a Masonic paper, usually, that brings up Ashmole's initiation into Masonry, even quoting his entry previously quoted, such to give the impression that they read the diary. And then they'll talk about how Ashmole learned some secrets from a mysterious Father Backhouse, whom they presume to be a Rosicrucian. If you happen upon a paper or a book that talks about Father Backhouse as some great mystery, then it will be obvious they did not actually read Elias Ashmole's diary. A bit about this diary before proceeding. So it's not a diary that he wrote in every day. It's a compilation of notes and various materials from his life that is neatly organized so that he could write an autobiography, but he died before being able to write such an autobiography. So 25 years later, in 1717, after Ashmole's death, his diary was published. Who is this Father Backhouse, and did he actually make Ashmole a Rosicrucian or something like that? Ashmole first mentions this Father Backhouse on April 3rd, 1651. Quote, Mr. William Backhouse of Swallowfield in Berkshire caused me to call him Father thenceforward. Yeah, he's got a name, William Backhouse. All that anyone needed to do to not render Father Backhouse as some mysterious secret master is to actually read the rest of the book. William Backhouse is nonetheless a strange guy. I mean, he's no Giovanni da Correggio, but he's a really weird guy. He was deeply engaged in philosophy, alchemy, astrology, and the occult in general, being particularly influenced by the Rosicrucian manifestos, which were published while he was studying at Oxford. He would stay out of the public eye, largely, if he could avoid it. He wasn't really a recluse. I mean, he definitely kept a fairly large circle of friends, but generally avoided the masses and being noted in news circulars and so forth. Ashmole had to have had Backhouse's acquaintance before this diary entry. A couple of months before, on February 1st, 1651, Ashmole notes that he met with Mrs. Elizabeth Backhouse, that is, William Backhouse's mother, and made an agreement with her to purchase her late husband's books, those of Samuel Backhouse. It was just this particular meeting with Backhouse on April 3rd that Ashmole became his mystical pupil. Thenceforth, in Ashmole's diary, usually, he refers to Backhouse as Father Backhouse. Later that year, Backhouse would introduce Ashmole to Sir Thomas Ruthven, a noted chemist, on April 26, and on June 10th, quote, Mr. Backhouse told me I must now needs be his son, because he had communicated so many secrets to me, end quote. Obviously, their teacher-pupil relationship has developed so intensely that they refer to each other as father and son. Ashmole would actually pen a poem to Backhouse that celebrates their relationship as such, and I think it's actually worth reading in full. From this blessed minute, I'll begin to date my years in happiness since you create what wise philosophers call life and vow. I ne'er perceived what being was till now. See how the power of your adoption can transmute imperfect nature to be man. Nay, with one word may yet refine it more than all the best digested Indian ore. Your son, 'tis so, for I begin to find your ancestors' large thoughts grow in my mind. I feel that noble blood spring in my heart, which does entitle me to some small part of grandsire Hermes' wealth, and hope to have interest in all the legacies he gave to his successive children, from whom too I most derive what is conferred by you. To prove each my descent, I need not see a biased herald from my pedigree. That I'm true bred, question it he that dare, if these my agate eyes on the sun can stare, or cause a mercury encrest thy whole, since my crude mercuries transmute to gold. Till vouch my fate for honor, wit, descent, and all which the hermetic tribe is lent. Then be you blessed, my stars, who gave to me so blessed a time for this nativity, that placed the gold lion in the east, when soul within the ram the ninth possesseth. As if their influence meant to ope the way, to make night mysteries shine clear as day. Hast ye some good direction that shall lead my father's hand with that of blessing to me head, and leave it there his leaves of Hermes' tree, to deck the naked ash, bequeath to me his legacy of eyes to the blind mole spare, and though a younger son, make me his heir. Their mystical teaching and learning grows on into 1652. On March 10th, quote, "This morning my father Backhouse opened himself very freely, touching the great secret," end quote. Then on April 12th, quote, "This morning I received more satisfaction from my father Backhouse to the questions I proposed," end quote. Backhouse would grow ill in 1653. On May 13th, Ashmole notes, quote, "My father Backhouse, lying sick in Fleet Street over against St. Dunstan's Church, and not knowing whether he should live or die, about 11 o'clock, told me in syllables the true matter of the Philosopher's Stone, which he bequeathed to me as a legacy," end quote. On May 30th, 1662, Backhouse died at his home at Swallowfield and was buried on June 17th. That's all. That's it for what Ashmole tells us of Backhouse. There is no mention of Rosicrucian whatsoever here. There really isn't a mention of Rosicrucianism in Ashmole's diary at all. Yet we know Backhouse had an interest in Rosicrucianism, but nothing is noted during his time to indicate anything he communicated to Ashmole was of a Rosicrucian nature. Now, what makes everything a bit more confusing is that during this time period, anything occulty could be and would be called Hermetic, Rosicrucian, magic, occult, etc. Kind of like how today, if you go on eBay and look for a Masonic book, it doesn't even have to be an esoteric book, but you will have a label like Rare, Masonic, Occult, Illuminati, Rosicrucian, Satanic, and My Brother in Christ. This is a centennial celebration book of the history of Cherished Friendship Lodge. Calm down. So these terms were generally interchangeable, so it's difficult to say if the use of the term Rosicrucian means Rosicrucian or it's just a byword for mystical or esoteric. So what did Backhouse actually communicate in secret to Ashmole? Well, it's a secret. That's kind of the point. It's one of those things that we can only speculate upon, and anyone's guess will be as good as any other. We can surmise that it was obviously secret, duh. Perhaps secrets that had been communicated to Backhouse under oath. So it may have been part of a tradition of an alchemical secret society. or maybe something akin to the Lucidarium grimoire tradition, such as in Liber Juratus, wherein the master will communicate these magical rites in secret to a successor. These secrets are obviously such that they required great discretion, perhaps viewing these things as very sacred, hence the need to communicate them in parts and syllables. It's tempting to assume the communication by syllables to be something like how the Masonic words are communicated in parts and syllables, but I mean, the Masonic ones, those are signs of recognition, and it seems doubtful that Backhouse was interested in any sort of society that required secret modes of recognition, much less to induct Ashmole into such a society one-on-one. It's not a very societal thing to communicate something like passwords one-on-one, like, where's the rest of the group? But that's really all we know, and about as much as can be surmised. So, back to the question, was Elias Ashmole a Rosicrucian? Well, yes. Sort of, kind of, no. There never was an actual society of Rosicrucians. They are an invention of Andrea. It's probably like Nietzsche's free spirits. They don't actually exist. They were something he made up because he was lonely. However, really anyone can be a Rosicrucian. There never was a real group, so there aren't some secret masters barring admission. Are you a devotee of Jesus Christ? Do you believe in the Holy Trinity and the power of the Holy Spirit? Are you anti-Catholic, or at least anti-corruption of the Holy Church? Do you revere and uphold the visionary ideologies of Joaquin de Fiore and Jakob Burma? Do you think Paracelsus is like absolutely the best ever? Do you like doing scientific and alchemical experiments in search of truth in the physical world and how such reveals the nature of the divine? Do you think Martin Luther could have gone a bit further in his Reformation? Wouldst thou like to see the world? Do you like the idea of rejecting any and all religious habits and simply wearing the customary clothing of where you live? This means no aprons and collars, guys. Can you read the Fama and the Confessio and agree to those principles and tenets? And read the Chemical Wedding and grasp and appreciate its spiritual and operative alchemical significance? Can you keep a secret? Then congratulations, you can be a Rosicrucian too. I think the fact that Andrea, Hess, and Bessel declined to answer any of these letters and publish pamphlets of those seeking to join the Rosicrucians indicates that being a Rosicrucian was something in your heart. It's not an oath. It's not a deuce card, it's not a title, it's not a fork and knife club. It's who you are and what you do. And I think Ashmole, well, he fits the bill. But at the same time, he never comes forward and proclaims himself a Rosicrucian in the way that Mayer and Flood do. I think if he said he was a Rosicrucian, then I'd believe him. But since he doesn't, then we need to reserve asserting too much. I don't think that the true secrets of the most secret secrets of the most illustrious secret order of the secret brothers of the Rosy Cross is what Backhouse was communicating to Ashmole. I do believe there was some secret knowledge that was part of some secret tradition that was being communicated, likely alchemical, since it concerned in part the Philosopher's Stone. I think Ashmole and Backhouse were good about keeping this secret matter secret, and we will just never know what it is, which means they were successful. I don't think it was Rosicrucian, but I do believe both men could fit the criteria of being a Rosicrucian, though given their deep intellectual and practical interest in the occult, publicly proclaiming to be a Rosicrucian was kind of beneath them. The takeaway is quite simple. Both Backhouse and Ashmole, they fit the criteria to be a Rosicrucian if they wanted to proclaim such. But the reality is that there is no evidence that either so much as even discussed Rosicrucianism with each other. They were too busy with bigger fish like, oh, I don't know, the Philosopher's Stone.
Great googly moogly. What an awesome piece. I really loved this. As Patrick was going through this, I kept thinking to myself, well, the Philosopher's Stone seems to be sort of a Rosicrucian thing, so maybe that is where this confusion comes from. But then again, these guys are titans of philosophy. And in that, we see their attributes and we want to put them in a camp. In particular, we want to elevate them to some mystical level. And by doing so, maybe we want to put them in a camp, something like the Rosicrucians. But as Brother Patrick says, this is a sort of a wholesale invention, or as Andre says, he calls it a lampoon. Again, not a comedy of sorts, but more of a philosophy, a story. And we place value in that, and these groups spun off. And so whether or not Ashmole and his quote-unquote father were Rosicrucians, well, who's to say? But certainly there is this idea that people who are elevated to an extent in the occult landscape, there's this idea that there's no longer a need to codify the system to which you belong. You sort of break through the top like the elevator, the Wonkavator, right? You're going to shoot through the roof and fly around. You're no longer constrained by any particular system. You recognize everything for what it is, and you are working toward the better good, all of these kinds of things. So I need to thank, and we all should thank, Worshipful Brother Patrick Dey for shining some light on this one. Certainly, we all learned something, and I appreciate all of his work that he puts into this, because it is not only fascinating and educational, but it is also entertaining. So thank you very much, Worshipful Brother. Can't wait for the next one. I want to thank everybody for listening this week. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode. I want to thank our producers, fellows, contributors, and legacy partners. Again, if you're out there thinking, how can I help support this show? Well, this is how. Go to the Support the Show tab on the website and learn about those ways you can donate a couple dollars to the show. That money goes right back into the production of this program, which helps us make this program and do it the way we do it, at the highest quality possible. You can also help by sharing the show with your brothers, sharing it on Facebook, on Instagram. If we've put something out, share it around. People get curious. They come to the website. They go, oh, what's this all about? And I can't tell you how many guys have said, hey, I came to Masonry because a brother, a man I later became a brother to, shared this with me before I became a Mason, listened to it, and found the information to be really good, and it got me interested, and I've been a member ever since. And they go through the degrees and things, and this is like, holy cow, you guys make this possible. So thank you all so very much. We'll talk to you all next week. Until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WCY Media.
Why, that's BBS rock.